This is part one of my lecture on the Winter's Tale. This is a really difficult play to read. It's a really unusual play in Shakespeare's canon as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that first, and we're going to work in these two lectures through pretty closely through Acts 1 and Acts 2 and Act 2. So just to say a little bit about this. This is categorized in the Shakespeare canon as a problem play. Which means it's not clear how to categorize the play. It's not clear whether it's a comedy, a tragedy, something in between. And I won't say anything more about why that's so right now until I want to wait until next week when you've actually read the full text of the play. So I will say just be prepared for lots of big changes as you move into Act 4. And for being sort of thrown out of sorts and not quite clear of where you are, especially in terms of how the play seems to change genres. It seems to change completely at two moments, so be on the lookout for that. Okay, we'll go into that next week. But if we open, so this is, it's a tale for winter, a tale that's good to be told in winter, as Mamilius says in Act 1. So what does that mean? So this is a tale that tells us something cold, something dark, something sad in some ways. It does more than that, though, and you'll see as you work through it how that's so. So we open in the palace of Leontes. Leontes is in Sicily. He's the king of Sicily. He's referred to as Sicilia in the opening lines. He is has been best friends with Polixenes, the king of Bohemia, also met in the first lines of the play, or in the first act anyway. So we open the play in Sicily with a discussion between Camillo and Archidamus. These are two servants in the service of Leontes and Polixenes, and they're discussing their kings, their respective lords, right? So we open and we have a description of the affection, the genuine affection between these two somewhat brothers. They were raised together. They're not actually brothers. But if we look at lines 20 to 30, Cecilia, Camillo is saying, Cecilia, king of Sicily, Leontes, cannot show himself overkind to Bohemia. Polixenes, king of Bohemia. They were trained together in their childhoods, meaning fully trained, academic training, schooling, religious training, and so on. Training in leadership, in the rules of kingship. And there rooted betwixt them such an affection, the word I've circled on the page, which cannot choose but branch now. So they will never become unaffectionate toward one another, is the claim here. The word affection is really important. I'm just going to go through some of a few terms here before we dive into the first act and what actually happens with Leontes. The word affection is, as I've told you with Shakespeare, very, very important for this play. Shakespeare often in his opening moments will reveal a few key terms, as in Macbeth, fair, foul, and rapture, right? So here we have affection. Leontes will describe his ridiculous and very vicious jealousy over his sort of fantasies about what he thinks is happening between his wife and Polixenes as a kind of being affected. So to have affection here means to be very, very closely emotionally tied to something, to be very sort of loving, very, very close in that way, the way that we commonly understand the word affection. But it also has more significant connotations. It's a religious term, which means to sort of be fully filled with this sense of connection to something else, or this to be fully filled up with a certain emotion in some way. So religiously speaking, this is a word that Catholic saints would often use to describe their sense of being filled up with the presence of God. And It's a term in early American literature to describe the same sort of sense of feeling in different forms of Protestant denominations. So it's a really sort of deeply religiously laden word that Shakespeare's audience would have understood. It also has the common meaning of just being very closely emotionally tied to one another. So it's a word, though, that expresses this strong sense of being filled up with this emotion that you just takes power over you, which makes sense when we see how Leontes embodies not this divine emotion or feeling of some kind, but this just absolutely crazed kind of psychological rage, right, over what he thinks is happening with his wife and his best friend. And we'll talk about this more in detail next week, but there are lots of ways in this play that Shakespeare is, as we've seen a little bit before, really trying to mixing religious with secular uses of terms, and really being really careful not to explicitly call out Catholic or Protestant doctrines here. He's living in a time of rampant persecutions of Catholics, and he himself was raised, we think, as a Catholic, as I mentioned last week, and he's very, very careful to embed the religious terminology and the conceptions into his plays as pieces of art, as pieces of the theater. So we'll go on with that. That's kind of a long explanation there, but I want to lay that out. So with this word affection, so this is the kind of tightness between these two best friends. And we'll see that word affection a lot, okay? And that idea, especially when we get to the closing scene for this play, which I won't discuss in this at all because it's kind of a shocker. So since their more mature dignities and royal necessities, I'm back on the opening page, made separation of their society, their encounters, though not personal, have been royally attorneyed with interchange of gifts, letters, loving embassies, that they have seemed to be together, though absent. So they've got this long-lasting bond that has been kept in place through the exchange of gifts over the years, through embassies, that is to say, representatives moving between the two countries, speaking for their affections to one another, communicating, and so on. They've kept up this bond. They've seemed to be together, though absent, shook hands as over a vast, and embraced it as it were from the ends of opposed winds. The heavens continue their love. So there we have. So there's no malice between them. They're best friends. We're kind of setting up here, in some ways, the stage for the absolute inexplicability of Leontes' behavior that's coming up. So we go to scene 2, and we've got these two brothers who grew up together in this somewhat, as we'll find out soon, idyllic boyhood together, best friends, educated in the same ways. And we open meeting Polixenes. He is, and I won't go through the details here, he's speaking with Leontes, explaining that he needs to go back to Bohemia, specifically because at line 11, scene 2, line 11, page 1618, he has fears of what may chance breed upon his absence, upon our absence from Bohemia. He wants to get back. He thinks that, something might be up. He needs to get back and pay attention in general to bad things that might be happening at home. He is the king. He wants to get back home. But there is this sense, I'm not going to get back to this right away, but Polixenes has working on him a kind of sense of this idea of evil breeding at home. He's suspicious and judgmental in some ways that Leontes is as well, but in this scene, we kind of see hints of it. We don't see it fully come into being. We will see it later in the play. So we have here, a way in which they're similar, but Leontes is expressing his suspicions in a much more powerful and really violent way here. So we have here Leontes then, and I'm just summarizing the next lines, trying to urge his friend to stay. And he turns to his queen, Hermione, and asks her to urge Polixenes to stay. I will not then continue through her lines either. There's a back and forth between Hermione and Polixenes, and she succeeds in convincing Polixenes to stay, right? She's performing here. Well, I won't say what she's doing. She's just, you're you have a party, you have friends over. Your husband says, "Oh, come on, honey, get the guest to stay. Tell them not to leave." And so the guest or the hostess perhaps might turn on her charms and try to get people to stay a bit longer. It's a completely kind of normal occurrence. So we turn here, and here's where we're going to start to look through some of the lines carefully. At line around between 85 and 90 on page, what is it, 1619, we have Leontes ask of Hermione, "Is he won yet?" That is to say, will Polixenes stay? "He'll stay, my lord." Sudden change. "At my request he would not." Hermione, "My dearest, thou never spokest to better purpose." Never? Never but once. And when is that other time that she spoke? Well, the time that she agreed to marry him, when he had wooed her earlier. So he refers back to his wife's wooing, or being wooed by him, allowing him to woo her, and then talks about the other time she's speaking. Well, here, Hermione wooing Polixenes to stay herself. So we go on to the top of the next column, and here's where Leontes, completely out of the blue, very, very suddenly jumps into, and you have to imagine this being performed, this just absolute rage at what he thinks is going on. Again, comes out of nowhere. We have no sort of preparation for this. And again, the version that you should watch from the BBC, simply because you have a version, doesn't do the best job of this. This is a really difficult play to perform. So it's not often performed because it's really long to perform it. And it's complicated for other reasons. I don't want to say why until you've finished reading the play. But we don't have much to look at. There aren't a lot of great I've seen some great live performances, but I don't know of a... there was a Kenneth Branagh version came out, performance on the stage last year that I've not been able to see, that I'd like to see. But anyway, we have here Leontes totally jumping into a rage, right? So it seems he's got this best friend, wife who's very sort of devout, a very simple opening scene, and he screams, I'm going to sound kind of silly doing this, but, too hot, too hot. Right? He's hot. He's hot with rage. He's just, he's like, what is he imagining? To mingle friendship far as mingling bloods, right? Ooh, mingling bloods, right? You see what he's getting at? I have tremor cordis in me. My heart is shaking, right? My heart dances, but not for joy, not joy. This entertainment may a free face put on, derive a liberty from hardiness, from bounty, fertile bosom, and well become the agent. To may I grant, but to be paddling palms and pinching fingers as now they are, and making practised smiles as in a looking glass, and then to sigh as 'twere more to the dear. Oh, that is entertainment my bosom likes not, nor my brows. Mamilius, art thou my boy? All right, what in God's name just happened here, right? So he is suddenly imagining this exchange between his best friend and wife as suggestions that they're having some kind of affair, that they're, that they're mingling their bloods, that, all of this sort of sweet talk between them suggests that there's much more going on. And his filled up with rage. He is hot. His bosom likes it not. And then he says, his bosom doesn't like it, nor do his brows. So do you have a footnote on this? You do have a footnote on what the brows are alluding. Look at the bottom of the page, 119, alluding to the common Elizabethan notion that a cuckold grew horns. So what Leontes is referring here to here, and he will again in these two acts, is his status as a cuckold. And what that means to be a cuckold is a man who is, unaware that his wife is, as my grandmother used to say, a loosey-goosey. She's running around with other men, right? And the word derives from the word cuckoo, from a cuckoo bird. And a cuckoo bird delivers lays its eggs in other nests, not in its own, but in others' nests. So the word cuckold comes from that, to be a husband whose wife is laying her eggs elsewhere, so to speak. And the horns, the brows refer to these horns. A cuckold was described as wearing horns. There are lots of paintings and drawings of this in Elizabethan England and before. The word came into being sometime around, I think, 1100. It's in Chaucer and so on. So he's growing these horns. They put horns on this cuckolded man, because stags, male deer, when they're fighting, fighting viciously with their horns, would have to, in losing a battle, give over his partner, his wife. So that's where the horns come from. That's where the idea of the cuckold comes from. It's going to come up again, repeatedly. So Leontes, at the same moment that he imagines all of this stuff happening between his best friend and his wife, he imagines himself to be the worst kind of cuckold, as if everybody can notice it except him. And that's the joke with the cuckold. Everybody else is supposed to know it except the man being cheated on. So then he turns suddenly, when he realizes or thinks that he's a cuckold, to his son, Mamilius. Art thou my boy? What is he suspecting? Look at the pace of this rage, and of this fantasy developing here. He's starting to imagine that his son is not actually his son. So, my good lord, Mamilius responds. This little, like, 8-10-year-old kid, right? Effects in faith, that's my bullcock. So he's thinking, and he's saying, and yet the steer, the heifer, and the calf, all are called neat, still virgiling upon his palm. How now, you wanton calf? Art thou my calf? Asks him directly. Imagine this kid sitting there going, yeah, Dad. Yes, if you will, my lord. He's probably completely confused. Thou wants a rough passion, shoots that I have, to be full like me, to be like a cuckold. Yet they say we are almost as like as eggs. Women say so, that will say anything. All right. But were they false and order blithe as wind? And I'm going to skip down a little bit. Say, my dearest, my collop, can thy damn mate be affection? And there's that word, right? He is completely filled up with this rage, this feeling of rage, and jealousy over what he thinks is happening. Thy intention stabs the center. Thou dost make possible things not so held. Communicates with dreams. How can this be? With what's unreal, thou coactive art, and fellest nothing. Okay, so let's keep going a little bit. We've seen Leontes' crazy rage, and now he's going to turn, and we're going to see how other people receive or judge this rage. And we're telling you that Shakespeare will give us insight into who characters are by means of how other characters perceive them or judge them, right? So we get Leontes saying various, making various claims to himself. And then we turn to the first interaction, the first sort of sense from another character of what's going on with Leontes. And what we're finding, and what we'll find all the way until through Act 3, I won't say anything about Act 3 right now, but we will find no verification, right? No verification of what Leontes thinks, right? No one will agree with him. Everyone will think he's sort of out of his gourd. He gets no support for what he's imagining, and yet he persists. Okay? So in spite of all evidence, against all evidence to the contrary, and against the counsel of his most trusted friends, his devoted wife, his trusted counselors, the counselors of others, he will resist all evidence and claim that he knows what's right. And we're going to find out that this is disastrous for him and everybody else because he is deadly wrong. Okay, so that's where we're heading. That's not the end of the play, but that's where we're heading right now. So we'll look now at some of the other characters' responses to how he's behaving. And this performance can be terrifying, Leontes' performance. It can also be terrifying and funny. I've seen it done a number of different ways to make him look ridiculous in a completely frightening way, or in a frightening yet also weirdly comic way, because this sort of like, you can't be serious, right? So let's look then to first... All right, let's go to another aside from Leontes. So it's confirmed that Polixenes will stay for just a bit, and Leontes at the continues with an aside on 1620 at the bottom of the right-hand column. He says to himself, "I'm angling now." So Polixenes is staying for a while. "I'm angling. I'm up to something. I'm going to catch them. Though you perceive not how I give line," like a fisher, right? A fisherman or a fisherwoman, right? He's throwing the line out and angling. Go to, go to. And he says, how she holds up the neb, the bill to him, and arms her with the whole boldness of a wife to her allowing husband, acting as if they're behaving like husband and wife. Gone already. Inch. Here he goes getting crazy again. And we're seeing the cuckold image. Inch thick, knee deep, oarhead, and ears a forked one. He's a cuckold. Go play, boy, play. Thy mother plays. This is awful. I mean, this is really like, you can laugh. It's just because it's so awful. Thy mother plays, and I play too, but so disgraced a part, whose issue will hiss me to my grave. Contempt and clamor will be my nail. Go play, boy, play. There have been, or I am much deceived, cuckolds ere now. Lots of men have been cuckolds. And many a man there is, I'm skipping a bit, holds his wife by the arm that little thinks she has been sluiced in his absence. Horrible way to put that. You can look into that, what that means on your own. And his pond fished by his next neighbor, by Sir Smile, his neighbor. That Sir Smile is just as ridiculous as it sounds to you, as it would have sounded to Shakespeare's audience. Nay, there's comfort in it, whilst other men have gates, and those gates opened as mine against their will. All of this imagery very, very explicitly referring to the entrance of Polixenes into Hermione. It is vulgar. It is as clear as you might not want to think that it is. So again, just showing how excessive this how much taken over, how much affected he is by this sense of rage and jealousy. As mine against their will, should all despair that they have revolted wives, a tenth of mankind would hang themselves. So many men have suffered from this. Physic, medicine, cure, there's none for. It is a body planet that will strike where 'tis predicament, and 'tis powerful, think it, from east, west, north, and south. Be it concluded, no barricado for a belly. I'm going to skip down a bit. How now, boy? I am like you, they say. Why, that's some comfort. What, Camilla there? Aye, my good lord. Go play, Mamilius, thou art an honest man. All right. So Leontes comes in, Camillo comes in, and here's where we have a first response to Leontes' crazed fantasy of what he thinks is going on. And so he says, and it's Leontes. It's kind of a funny scene. He's just kind of trying to get Camillo to agree with his perception of what's happening. And it's just not working. And he tries to get him in all these different ways. So he says here, go down to line 220, just a little further down the page. How did they stay? Why did they all stay? At the good queen's entreaty. Camilla responds, at the queen's be it. Good should be pertinent. But so it is not. It is not. She's not good, right? Was this taken by any understanding, pate but thine? For thy conceit is soaking, will draw in more than the common blocks. Not noted, is it, but of some finest natures, right? Business, my lord? What the business, right? Lower messes, perchance, are to this business purblind. Others don't see this business. What's happening? Business, my lord? I think most understand Bohemia stays here longer. In other words, he doesn't know what Leontes is talking about. He's like, and he thinks he must be, what's the business at hand that people don't know about? Well, sure, everyone knows Polixenes is staying because we all saw him agree to stay. So, right, and Leontes says, ha! Camillo stays here longer, trying to figure out what the pertinent part here is that he's supposed to be understanding or agreeing with. Leontes, aye, but why? Why does he stay? To satisfy your highness and the entreaties of our most gracious mistress. Satisfy? The entreaties of your mistress satisfy, right? So he's getting Camilo to put this like crazy language into taking these words completely just out of context to describe, right? Yes, she agreed to. He's going to stay to satisfy Hermione. Ha ha ha. Gotcha. You admitted it, Camilo. This is nuts. This is, it's kind of funny. He says, let that suffice. I have trusted thee, Camilo, with all the nearest things to my heart as well, right? And he basically says, you have deceived me. You didn't tell me. You helped to cover this up. Camilla responds, be it forbid, my lord. Now he gets him here. To bide upon it, thou art not honest. So either you've lied, or if thou inclines that way, thou art a coward. Or, right, if you already knew what was going on, you're a coward for not telling me, which hoaxes honesty and so on. Or be condesserving, grafted in my serious trough, and negligent. Or you were negligent, you just didn't know what was going on. Or a fool, you just didn't understand what was going on. He can't win, right? Camilla responds, my gracious lord, and here's where we get that perspective and the first bit of argument against what Leontes is thinking from another character. I may be negligent, foolish, and fearful. In every one of these no man is free, but that his negligence, his folly, his fear, and so on, right? He moves down to the bottom around 265. But beseech your grace, be plainer with me. Let me know my trespass by its own visage. In other words, be clear with me about exactly what you think I've done. Had not you seen Camilo? Again, we get the cuckold, but that's passed out. You have, or your eyeglass is thicker than a cuckold's horn, right? There's that horn. Or heard, for to a vision so apparent rumor cannot be mute. Or thought, for cogitation resides not in that man that does not think. My wife is slippery. Ew, yuck, right? If thou wilt confess, or else be impudently negative, to have nor eyes, nor ears, nor thought, then say my wife's a hobby horse. Lovely. Deserves a name as rank as any flax wench that puts two before her troth plight. Say and justify it. In other words, tell me my wife puts out. And it's vulgar. And Camillo is just completely shocked and horrified to hear his mistress spoken about this way, his queen. I would not be a stander by to hear my sovereign mistress clouded so. Without my present vengeance taken, shrew my heart, you never spoke what did become you less than this. It's about as plainly put as one could put it to Leontes, you never spoke what did become you less than this. He's just disgusted and disappointed and disappointed in his master. All right. So Camillo ends up banishing him for not supporting him or for being a bad servant. Now, what will happen at the end of the scene is, and we won't talk through this, but he's banished, and Polixenes says, run off to Bohemia with me. You can be my servant. So that's what happens. Just keep in mind that Polixenes, we'll find out, has a suspicious and judgmental spine to himself as Leontes does, and that it will come out later on. He's going to make a very harsh judgment against somebody whom he will banish from Bohemia. So we'll get back to that. It's not as severe as this, but it's not good. So right now he's kind of the good guy. He's certainly the reasonable one who is trying to just get away so that he can be safe from Leontes while he then tries to figure out what's happening, what just happened. All right, so we go to Act 2. This begins at the bottom of page, what is it here, 1623. All right, and we have again Hermione talking to her young son Milius with her ladies-in-waiting around her. And they're having a lovely sort of conversation. It's very clear that they're quite close, obviously. We get a portrait of, remember, the pregnant Hermione playing with her young son, who is then sent out of the room for a bit, or is off to the side. Who knows how this might be staged. And Leontes comes in and begins to talk with Hermione. And says at let's go to page 1624, line 55. 1624, line 55. I know it too well, Leontes begins. Give me the boy. I am glad you did not nurse him, though he does bear some signs of me, yet you have too much blood in him. What is this, sport? Hermione doesn't know how to take this, because up till now, as far as the play has shown us, they have a very loving relationship. There's nothing wrong. Everything's good. So, bear the boy hence. He shall not come about her. He's not allowing Hermione to be with her son anymore. Away with him. Remember throughout this play when she's being accused and so on that she is, well, not throughout this play, but right now, until she has her baby, which she will shortly, she's 9 months pregnant. So she's in this swollen state, as the next line. With that she's big for, 'tis Polixenes has made her thee swell thus. So he's directly accusing her of having Polixenes' baby. But I'd say he did not, and I'll be sworn you would believe my saying, however you lean to the nayward. So now Hermione is going to try to confront this irrational jealousy of Leontes. It's not going to go well. You, my lords, and he's saying this in front of everybody, look on her, mark her well. He's making a public spectacle of her. He's not having a private conversation with her about this. He's doing it in public as the king, with everyone in surrounding watching, while the boy has been removed, not allowed to be with his mother. But about to say that she's a goodly lady, and the justice of your hearts will dare to add, 'tis pity she's not honest, honorable, praise her for but this, and he goes on. And at the end of that long speech, she's an adulteress. This is a public charge, right? We'll continue. Should a villain say so, Hermione says, the most replenished villain in the world, he were as much more villain. You, my lord, but do mistake. You have mistook my lady, Polixenes, for Leontes. O thou thing, which I call not a creature of thy placeless barbarism, and this goes on. So Hermione responds again, no, by my life. Privy to none of this. I don't know what you're talking about. How will this grieve you when you shall come to clearer knowledge? She trusts that he will come out of this rage, this affected state. You will grieve. He will be deeply grieving when he comes to clearer knowledge. And indeed this will happen. That you have published me. You've made this a public announcement. You've charged me in public like this. Gentle, my lord, you scarce can write me thoroughly then to say you did mistake. So now that the charge has been made, it's public. You can't really correct it. You can't really take it back, even if you do take it back. Because once a charge is made, you know this with anything, once a charge is made public, there's always a suspicion. There's always a lingering wondering among those who have heard it. So she's been disgraced. It can be perhaps corrected in some way, but it can't be undone. No, if I mistake in those foundations which I build upon, the center is not big enough to bear a schoolboy's top. Away with her to prison. So she's sent off to prison, and she says, as she's not completely defending herself against the charges anymore, she knows that she can't, but explaining to those around her, ladies in waiting, what will happen next. She says there's some ill planet reigns. In 105, she's trying to find a reason for this. I must be patient till the heavens look with an aspect more favorable. Good my lords, I am not prone to weeping, as our sex commonly are. So she's not going to cry and weep, but as her sex commonly is. But why? In the want of which vain dew perchance shall dry your pities. In other words, if she cried, she might get more pity from people, which is, well, we'll come back to this. But I have that honorable grief lodged here, which burns worse than tears drown. Beseech you all, my lords, with thoughts so qualified as your charity shall best instruct you, measure me. In others, take account, and so the king's will be performed. Shall I be heard, he says. Who is it goes with me? Beseech you, my highness, my women may be with me, for you see my plight requires it. So she needs her women to come with her to help because she's 9 months pregnant. When you shall know your mistress, she says to her Do not weep, good fools. Fool is a term, it means other things, but here it's a term of endearment for those close to her, my dears, right? My ladies who assist me, my servants. Do not weep, good fools. There is no cause, right? Now, what's happening is very sad. It's tragic, but there's no cause to weep because Hermione has done nothing wrong, okay? When you shall know your mistress has deserved prison, then abound in tears as I come out. This action I now go on is for my better grace. Adieu, my lord. I never wished to see you sorry. Now I trust I shall. My women, come, you have leave. Go to our bidding hence, and the queen leaves with the ladies. All right. So she has rejected it. Everybody in the court, the ladies are horrified by this, do not believe it, right? Are just so sad to be seeing Hermione treated this way. Antigonus comes in, and we'll skip through some of this, but he too tries to resist what Leontes says to no avail. Leontes takes Camillo's flight, right, as proof that Camillo was in on the whole scheme. So he's taking everything around him, which is evidence to the contrary of what he's saying, as proof of what he's saying. And this is, I hate to sort of throw loosely around a pop psychology term, but this is, he's a narcissist. So a narcissist is someone who understands everything in the world as being something about him or her. And we all know people like this. So, sometimes I'll get complaints, right, from someone I work with, or sometimes from, actually sometimes in the case you probably have this experience from people with my side, but from a student or something, look, I'm the only one in the world who has a lot to do, so therefore you need to, pay attention to me and understand everything is about that person and that person's needs, and in this case, what that person wants to believe about the world. And Leontes is completely acting like this. So we'll keep going, and there's, everybody is trying to object to this. Then we'll meet, I'm not saying anything more about Hermione because we'll get into her in much greater detail in class next week, especially when we get into Act 3. But just pay attention to the way that Hermione defends her honor without, in a way, sort of playing, without entering into the terms of Leontes' discussion. So she just rejects it all. She won't engage it. She just kind of rejects it and explains who she is. She doesn't get into the rhetoric and the claims and the ridiculous and vulgar language of her husband. She just dismisses it all and explains who she is. So keep that in mind, because we'll talk about maybe why she does that next week. And keep in mind also, as you're reading this, the way that Leontes and Polixenes later on will use language that suggests that these women are sort of up to no good and have divine powers, or in this case, evil powers. I shouldn't say divine, evil powers. They're being compared in ways, they're being witches, they're being called capable of witchcraft and things like this. And there's no time to sort of go into this in any detail right now, but remember that in 16th century England, there are burnings of witches, right? There are religious persecutions, burnings of witches, not unlike what was happening in Salem in the 1790s here. But what you need to, so specifically in the 1570s and 1580s, lots of burning of witches at the stake and so on, lots of Catholics fleeing England, and so and the persecution went both ways. Catholics were doing this in previous generations too, but there's a lot of sort of trying to account for the world's problems by blaming a scapegoat, by finding, in this case, a woman who seems threatening or powerful. Let's blame her. Let's say it's her problem, right? And you can see this all the time. We often take, it's easy to point to one person or one kind of person and say that person right there, that kind of person is the reason for all of the problems in the world. It's just that simple. That's what's happening here, and that's what Shakespeare, I think, is actually trying to mock, and also to explain, to kind of say, like, the world's a little bit more complicated than that, right? So Polixenes and Leontes want to believe that the world is black and white, and you divide people according to good or bad, and there's a lot of extremes in this play, and again, you're going to see more of this. And the women, oddly enough, in this play, I think it's kind of interesting, and several of the men too. I mean, Camilla's a really, fairly good servant, and we're going to see more of these more interesting and complicated male figures later in the play. But they just kind of try to say, no, actually, here's what's going on. Actually, it's more complicated than that. Actually, people are not that simple. Actually, right? So hang on to all that. And let's look to this final moment for this lecture, to Paulina, the entrance of Paulina. Now, Paulina is, I can't say much because you've got to get to the end of the play, but Paulina is the most fierce opponent of Leontes here, and she is his servant, and she is Hermione's, servant, and she is really going to go at Leontes and try to get him to realize that he's just out of his gourd right now, and he's not being reasonable, and she's trying to actually convince him that he's being an irrational tyrant. So Paulina, and that's the way you pronounce it, Paulina has come to try to talk Leontes back into some sort of sense, and she takes the baby just born to Hermione and lays it on the ground before Leontes. This is on line at 1627, around line 65, and there's a stage direction laying down the child. So she takes him, the child is a girl, and says here, let him that makes but trifles of his eyes first hand me. Leontes says, get her out of here. Trifle. In other words, I'll scratch your eyes out, you touch me, right? On mine own accord I'll off, but first I'll do my errand. The good queen hath brought you forth a daughter. Here 'tis, commends it to your blessing, thinking that just the laying down of this child, the seeing of this child, there's a lot. The seeing of the child will sort of snap Leontes out of his rage, out of his affected state. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But she's trying, she does her best here. And he says, a mankind witch. There we have it. She's called a witch. It's appeared earlier, actually, in more subtle ways, but we're going to see it in more forceful ways later on. Hence with her, out the door, a most intelligencing bawd. Not so. I am as ignorant in that as you, in so entitling me, and no less honest than you are mad, which is enough, I'll warrant, to pass for honest. Traitors, he calls her a traitor to Antigonus, her husband, and to the others who will not get rid of her. She calls him mad, right? If we go a little bit further, he calls the child a bastard, not his. Paulina says at the bottom of the page, forever unvenerable be thy hands, if thou takes upon the princess by that forced baseness which he has put upon it. He dreads his wife. He's saying, like, that Antigonus won't stand up to his wife. So I would you did. Then 'twere past all doubt you'd call your children yours. In other words, if you respected your wife the way that you should and the way she deserves, you would recognize that you have 2 children and that nobody here is against you. A nest of traitors. Okay. Paulina continues. Let's go down to, I'm finishing this up right now. You can read this carefully on your own. Here's where Paulina says to him succinctly at around line 115 what he is. I care not. He says, Leontes says, I'll have thee burnt, right? All these plays on, what was happening with witchcraft charges in the 16th century. I care not. It is a heretic that makes the fire. So a heretic is someone who does not doesn't speak orthodoxy, is someone who is against rejects the dominant. Well, in a religious sense, it's in a religious sense, it means that you do not follow the beliefs, you reject and overturn the beliefs of your religion. In this sense, Leontes is rejecting what is reasonable. He's a heretic to reason. He's a heretic to the facts of what is actually going on. He resists them. So it's a heretic that makes the fire. I care not, nor she which burns in it. I'll not call you tyrant, but this most cruel usage of your queen, not able to produce more accusation than your own weak-hinged fancy, something savors of tyranny, and will ignoble make you, yea, scandalous to the world. This is what will happen. All right, so she says to him, you can't produce a shred of evidence to justify or what you're saying. You have your own weak-hinged fancy. This is all in your head. You are a tyrant, therefore. It savors of tyranny. This is kind of a roundabout way. I won't call you a tyrant, but of course she's calling him a tyrant, right? It savors of tyranny. She won't say it directly, but that will ignoble you and make you scandalous. We will find out shortly that he's completely wrong. He will be exposed, and he will finally get that. But right now he's just wrapped up in his fantasies, and no reason or evidence or trust in another person can trust in another person's judgment will get him to give way on what he has convinced himself is happening. Okay, so that's where we stand for that, and now I will go on actually to discuss Act 3 a little bit. You didn't have to read that tonight, but it'll get you started and thinking, preparing to read the last 2 acts of the play, which are really kind of incredible. Okay,